It was a warm Friday evening in June when Captain Marcus Thompson finished his last round of paperwork at the 15th Precinct Police Station. The clock on his office wall showed 7:30 p.m., and the sunset painted the sky in beautiful orange and purple colors. After serving the department for 15 years, with the last 5 as captain, this was just another normal day for him, or so he thought. Marcus, a tall man with broad shoulders and kind eyes, gathered his belongings from his desk. His office walls were covered with awards, certificates, and family photos. One particular photo showed him at his promotion ceremony, standing proudly with his wife Sarah and their 2 children, Michael and Lisa. He had worked hard to reach this position, becoming one of the few black police captains in the state. Before leaving, he stopped by Officer Rodriguez's desk. "Make sure those community outreach reports are on my desk by Monday morning," he said with a friendly smile. The younger officer nodded respectfully. Everyone in the precinct knew Captain Thompson as a fair leader who always put his community first. Walking through the parking lot, Marcus loosened his tie slightly. The summer heat still lingered in the air, making his dark blue suit feel a bit uncomfortable. He reached his unmarked police vehicle, a black sedan with tinted windows that looked like any other civilian car. This was standard for high-ranking officers who sometimes needed to travel without drawing attention. As he started the engine, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. "Don't forget to pick up milk on your way home. Also, Michael got an A on his math test." A proud smile spread across Marcus's face. His son had been struggling with mathematics, and they had spent many evenings studying together at the kitchen table. The streets were relatively quiet as he drove through the city. Marcus took his usual road home, the one he had driven hundreds of times before. He passed by Joe's Diner, where he and his fellow officers often had lunch, and waved at old Mrs. Wilson, who was walking her dog outside the local grocery store. These small interactions reminded him why he loved serving this community. At a red light, Marcus thought about the meeting he had led earlier that day. The department was implementing new community policing initiatives, something he had pushed for since becoming captain. He believed that building trust between police officers and citizens was the key to making their city safer for everyone. The radio played softly in the background, an old soul song that reminded him of Sunday afternoons at his grandmother's house. She had always told him to stay strong and dignified, no matter what challenges life threw at him. Her words had guided him throughout his career, especially during times when he faced discrimination, both subtle and obvious. Looking in his rearview mirror, Marcus noticed how the streetlights reflected off his car's dark paint. He had chosen this vehicle himself when he was promoted to captain, appreciating its professional appearance while remaining understated. The tinted windows were standard department issue, providing necessary privacy for undercover work. His thoughts drifted to tomorrow's plans. It was Saturday, and he had promised to take Michael to his baseball game. Lisa had a piano recital in the afternoon, and then the whole family planned to have dinner together. These simple family moments meant everything to him, especially given how demanding his job could be. Marcus turned onto Oak Street, entering the quiet suburban area where many middle-class families lived. The houses here were neat and well-maintained, with kids' bicycles in driveways and American flags hanging from porches. This was the kind of peaceful neighborhood he worked hard to protect. He checked his watch, 7:45 p.m. If he hurried, he could still make it to the grocery store before it closed at 8 o'clock. Sarah would appreciate him remembering the milk, and maybe he'd pick up some ice cream as a surprise for Michael's good grade. It was these small gestures that kept their family strong and happy. The evening air was getting cooler now, and Marcus cracked his window slightly to enjoy the fresh breeze. Everything felt peaceful and normal. There was nothing unusual about this drive home, nothing to suggest that in just a few minutes, his evening would take an unexpected turn that would change not only his life, but the entire police department. As he approached the intersection of Maple and Pine, Marcus noticed a patrol car parked in the shadows of a large oak tree. He thought nothing of it. After all, he was a police captain, and this was his city. He had no reason to worry. Not yet. Officer James Peterson sat in his patrol car, finishing the last few bites of his sandwich from the local deli. He had been having a quiet evening shift, with only 2 speeding tickets issued in the past 4 hours. At 32 years old, Peterson was still relatively new to the force, having joined just 3 years ago after leaving his job as a security guard. The darkness was settling in, and the streetlights had just turned on. Peterson wiped some crumbs from his uniform and adjusted his body camera. That's when he noticed a black sedan with tinted windows driving past his hiding spot. Something about the car made him suspicious. Maybe it was the tinted windows, or perhaps it was just his gut feeling after years of security work. Without thinking twice, Peterson started his patrol car and pulled out onto the street. He quickly typed the license plate number into his computer system, but in his haste, he didn't wait for the complete results to load. Had he waited just 5 more seconds, he would have seen that the vehicle was registered to the police department. The red and blue lights from Peterson's patrol car lit up the quiet suburban street. Inside the black sedan, Captain Thompson noticed the flashing lights in his rearview mirror. He checked his speedometer. He wasn't speeding. His first thought was that maybe one of his officers needed to talk to him about something urgent. Peterson grabbed his radio but then hesitated. Something told him to handle this stop differently. Later, he would have to explain why he didn't follow standard procedure and call in the stop to dispatch. But at that moment, his hand moved from the radio to rest on his holster instead, a motion that would soon make him question his own instincts. The black sedan pulled over smoothly, following all proper procedures. Peterson noticed this but remained cautious. He stepped out of his patrol car, adjusting his bulletproof vest, a habit he had developed during his security guard days. The bright beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness as he approached the vehicle. "Driver, keep your hands where I can see them." Peterson's voice came out harder than necessary, echoing off the nearby houses. Inside their homes, curious neighbors peeked through their curtains at the scene unfolding on their quiet street. A dog started barking somewhere in the distance. Captain Thompson's hands stayed firmly on the steering wheel, positioned at 10 and 2 o'clock, exactly where he had taught countless junior officers to look for them during traffic stops. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. Through his side mirror, you could see Peterson approaching with his hand still resting on his weapon. "Evening, officer," Thompson said calmly, his deep voice steady despite the tension in the air. "May I ask why you pulled me over?" He deliberately kept his movements minimal, knowing all too well how quickly these situations could escalate. Peterson's flashlight beam swept across the interior of the car, revealing the clean leather seats and a department-issued laptop mounted on the dashboard. But in the darkness and his heightened state of alertness, he missed these obvious signs that this was a police vehicle. "License and registration," Peterson demanded, his voice still harsh. He kept his flashlight beam pointed slightly higher than necessary, straight into the driver's side mirror, making it difficult for Thompson to see him clearly. "Officer, I'm going to reach for my credentials very slowly," Thompson announced, his years of experience evident in his measured tone. "But before I do that, I think you should know something." Peterson's grip tightened slightly on his flashlight. "Keep your hands where they are and state your business," he snapped, the authority in his voice masking his growing uncertainty about the situation. Captain Thompson took a slow, deep breath. In his 20 years of law enforcement, he had been on both sides of traffic stops. But this one felt different. He could feel the weight of the moment, knowing that what happened next would matter not just for him, but for every officer who would hear this story. "Officer Peterson," Thompson said quietly, recognizing the younger officer from recent department meetings. "I'm Captain Marcus Thompson from the 15th Precinct, and I believe we need to have a serious conversation about proper traffic stop procedures." The flashlight beam wavered slightly as Peterson's hand began to shake. The night suddenly felt much colder than it had just moments before, and the weight of his mistake began to sink in as he realized he had just pulled over his commanding officer. The silence that followed Captain Thompson's words seemed to stretch for an eternity. Officer Peterson's flashlight beam still shook slightly, creating dancing shadows across the street. A car passed by slowly, its driver craning their neck to watch the scene unfold, before continuing down the quiet suburban road. I'm sorry, sir, but I need to verify your identity," Peterson stammered, trying to maintain some semblance of authority even as his confidence crumbled. His hand had finally moved away from his holster, but his body remained tense, caught between his training and his growing embarrassment. "Of course," Captain Thompson replied, his voice remaining steady and professional. "As I said, I'm going to reach for my credentials now. I'm moving my right hand slowly toward my inner jacket pocket." He narrated his movements clearly, just as he had taught countless officers to do during their training sessions on de-escalation techniques. Peterson watched as Thompson's hand moved with deliberate slowness. The captain's gold badge caught the flashlight beam as he pulled it out, along with his department ID. The shield's polished surface reflected the red and blue lights still flashing behind them, creating a small light show in the darkness. "Here you are, Officer Peterson," Thompson said, holding out his credentials. "I believe we met last month during the department-wide meeting about community policing initiatives. I was the one giving the presentation about improving officer-civilian interactions." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either of them. Peterson's face, already pale from recognizing his superior officer, now turned an even whiter shade as he remembered that meeting. He had even taken notes about proper traffic stop procedures and the importance of running complete plate checks before initiating stops. Notes that he had clearly forgotten tonight. "Captain, I didn't," Peterson started, but Thompson cut him off with a raised hand. "Before you continue, Officer Peterson, I'd like you to do something for me," Thompson said, his tone firm but not angry. "I want you to take a step back and tell me exactly what made you decide to pull me over tonight. And I want you to be completely honest, both with me and with yourself." Peterson shifted uncomfortably on his feet. The weight of his body camera felt suddenly heavier, knowing it was recording every word of this encounter. In the distance, another car slowed down to observe the scene, reminding both men that they had an audience. "I saw the vehicle, dark sedan, tinted windows, driving through this neighborhood at night," Peterson began, his voice getting quieter with each word. "I ran the plates, but I didn't wait for the full results. And?" Thompson prompted, knowing there was more to the story. Peterson swallowed hard. "And I made assumptions, sir. I saw the car, and I made assumptions that I shouldn't have made. I didn't follow proper protocol. I didn't call in the stop. I approached with my hand on my weapon. You saw what you expected to see," Thompson finished for him. "And those expectations led you to approach this situation in a way that could have ended very differently if I had been someone else, or if I had reacted differently to your aggressive approach." The truth of those words hung heavy in the night air. Both men knew that this exact scenario had ended tragically in other places, with other officers, with other drivers who didn't happen to be police captains. "Sir, I apologize," Peterson said, his voice barely above a whisper now. "I know that's not enough, but I truly am sorry." Captain Thompson looked at the younger officer for a long moment. He saw not just the mistake, but the opportunity it presented. Here was a chance to make a real difference, to turn this moment into something meaningful. "Officer Peterson, I'm going to step out of my vehicle now," Thompson announced. "And then you and I are going to have a conversation that's long overdue. Not as captain and officer, but as two men who both took an oath to protect and serve ALL members of our community." As Captain Thompson opened his car door, the street lights illuminated both men clearly for the first time during their encounter. Their reflections in the car's tinted windows showed two officers in the same uniform, serving the same community, but experiencing two very different realities of what that service meant. The time for pretense was over. The real lesson was about to begin. The cool night air felt heavy with tension as Captain Thompson stood face to face with Officer Peterson. Standing at 6 feet tall, Thompson's presence commanded respect, not just from his uniform or rank, but from the calm dignity he carried himself with. The flashing lights from Peterson's patrol car continued to paint the scene in alternating red and blue, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. Peterson's mind raced back to that department meeting last month. He remembered sitting in the third row of the briefing room, watching as Captain Thompson had given a powerful presentation about community policing. The captain had spoken about trust, about breaking down barriers, about seeing beyond preconceptions. Now those words came flooding back, hitting Peterson with the force of a physical blow. "Sir, I remember you now," Peterson said, his voice shaking slightly. "Your presentation about building bridges between the police and the community. You showed us those statistics about traffic stops and racial profiling." He paused, the weight of his actions tonight pressing down on him. "I took notes. I even told my partner it was one of the best presentations I'd ever seen." Thompson nodded slowly, watching the recognition and shame play across the younger officer's face. "Sometimes, Officer Peterson, the hardest lessons are the ones we learn when we least expect them. Tell me, what was going through your mind when you first saw my car?" Peterson looked down at his boots. then forced himself to meet his captain's eyes. Honesty was the only path forward now. I saw a dark car with tinted windows in what I considered a nice neighborhood. I made assumptions. I didn't wait for the plate check to complete. I acted on. He struggled to find the right words. On implicit bias, Thompson finished for him. The very thing we discussed in that meeting. The very thing you took notes about. His voice wasn't accusatory, but matter of fact. Do you remember what I said about how implicit bias affects split-second decisions? A dog barked in the distance, and somewhere a cricket chirped, creating an odd backdrop to this intense moment of professional and personal revelation. Peterson's hand unconsciously touched his body camera, knowing that everything was being recorded, his mistake, his shame, and hopefully, his learning. You said that our snap judgments reveal our deepest programmed responses, Peterson recalled, the words coming back to him clearly now. That we need to recognize these biases before we can overcome them. He let out a shaky breath. I failed tonight, sir. I failed you. I failed my training, and I failed myself. Captain Thompson took a step closer, his expression softening slightly. Recognition is the first step toward change, Officer Peterson. Tonight, you've had what we call a mirror moment, when you see your own biases reflected back at you so clearly that you can't ignore them anymore. A car drove by slowly, its occupants watching the two officers standing in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Thompson waited until it passed before continuing. Do you know what makes this situation different from many others? Thompson asked, gesturing between them. I'm wearing a badge. I have rank. I have the authority to make this a very difficult night for your career. He paused, letting those words sink in. But what about all the other black men who don't have a badge? Who don't have the protection of rank? Who don't have the benefit of 20 years of law enforcement experience to know exactly how to handle the situation? Peterson felt his eyes beginning to water. The full impact of his actions, and what they represented, hit him like a physical force. He thought about how differently this stop might have gone if the driver hadn't been his commanding officer. He thought about all the other stops he'd made, all the snap judgments, all the times he'd approached with his hand on his weapon. I need to do better, Peterson said quietly, but with conviction. We all need to do better. Captain Thompson checked his watch. It was nearly 8:30 p.m. now. His family would be wondering where he was, but this moment was too important to rush. Sometimes the best teaching moments came unplanned, and he knew that what happened next could shake not just Officer Peterson's career, but potentially the entire department's approach to traffic stops. Yes, we do, Thompson agreed. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about next. Captain Thompson gestured toward a nearby park bench, illuminated by a single streetlight. Let's sit down, Officer Peterson. I think it's time we had a real conversation. The two men walked over, their boots crunching quietly on the fallen leaves that dotted the sidewalk. The patrol car's flashing lights had finally been turned off, returning the street to its normal peaceful state. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees above them as they sat down, two officers in identical uniforms, but with very different life experiences. First thing, Thompson began, loosening his tie slightly. Tell me about your worst day on the job, the day that made you most afraid while wearing that uniform. His voice was gentle but firm, like a teacher guiding a student toward an important realization. Peterson thought for a moment before speaking. Last year, a routine traffic stop turned into a shootout. The driver had a warrant, and when I approached the car, he paused, taking a deep breath. I didn't sleep for weeks after that. Thompson nodded understandingly. Fear is real in our line of work. It shapes our reactions, influences our decisions. But here's what I want you to understand. Imagine feeling that same fear, but not just during traffic stops. Imagine feeling it every time you drive your car, every time you walk through a store, every time you see flashing lights in your rearview mirror. Peterson's eyes widened as the captain's words sank in. Thompson continued, I've been in law enforcement for 20 years. But before I'm a captain, before I'm an officer, I'm a black man in America. My uniform doesn't change that fact when I'm off duty. A cat darted across the street, momentarily drawing their attention before Thompson spoke again. Let me tell you about my son, Michael. He's 16 now. Last month, I had to have the talk with him, not about birds and bees, but about how to survive a police encounter. Can you imagine that, Officer Peterson, a police captain having to teach his own son how to stay alive during a traffic stop. Peterson felt his throat tighten. No, sir, I honestly can't imagine that. I told him, keep your hands visible at all times. Don't make sudden movements. Address the officer as sir or ma'am. Don't argue, even if you know they're wrong. Call me immediately afterward. Thompson's voice remained steady, but his eyes revealed the pain behind these words. These aren't just suggestions for him, they're survival skills. The crickets chirped in the background as Peterson absorbed this information. A couple walking their dog passed by, nodding respectfully at the two officers before continuing their evening stroll. Tonight, Thompson continued, you saw a black sedan with tinted windows and made assumptions. But let me ask you something, if you had seen me in my personal car, a minivan I drive to my kids' soccer games, would you have made the same choice to pull me over? Peterson's silence was answer enough. This isn't about making you feel guilty, Peterson. It's about awareness. Every decision we make as officers carries weight. Every traffic stop has the potential to change, or end, someone's life. Thompson pulled out his phone, showing Peterson his lock screen, a photo of his family at a recent barbecue. When you pulled me over tonight, you didn't just stop a black sedan. You stopped a father, a husband, a captain, a member of this community. Peterson looked at the happy family photo, then back at his captain. How do we fix this, sir? How do I fix this? It starts with acknowledgement, Thompson replied. Acknowledging our biases isn't weakness, it's the first step toward real strength, the kind of strength our community needs from its officers. He paused, considering his next words carefully. But acknowledgement isn't enough. We need action, change, and commitment to do better. The street had grown quieter now, as if the night itself was listening to this important conversation. Thompson checked his watch again, nearly 9 p.m. His family would be worried, but some moments were worth being late for. So, Officer Peterson, Thompson said, sitting up straighter on the bench, are you ready to be part of that change? The younger officer's response would determine not just his own future, but potentially the future of their entire department's approach to community policing. Officer Peterson sat quietly for a moment, his hands clasped together as he leaned forward on the park bench. The events of the evening played through his mind like a movie he couldn't stop watching. Above them, the streetlight buzzed softly in the night air, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Yes, sir, he finally answered, looking directly at Captain Thompson. I'm ready to learn, to change, to do whatever it takes to be better. His voice carried a conviction that surprised even himself. Thompson nodded, then pulled out his notebook. Let's break down exactly what happened tonight, step by step. I want you to tell me every decision you made, and more importantly, why you made it. He clicked his pen, ready to write. Peterson straightened his uniform and began. First mistake. I didn't wait for the complete plate check. I was too eager to make the stop. He rubbed his face with his hands, the reality of his actions becoming clearer. Second mistake. I didn't call it in to dispatch. I violated basic protocol because something in my mind told me this was going to be a certain type of stop. Captain Thompson wrote quietly, letting Peterson continue his self-analysis. Third mistake. I approached with my hand on my weapon. The driver, you, sir, have given me no reason to believe there was any threat. Peterson's voice cracked slightly. Fourth mistake. My tone was aggressive from the start. I came in hot, as if I was expecting trouble. A police car drove by slowly, the officer inside waving at Captain Thompson. Both men waited until it passed before continuing their conversation. Good, Thompson said, looking up from his notes. Now comes the harder part. For each of those mistakes, I want you to tell me what was going through your mind. Not what you think I want to hear, but the absolute truth. Peterson took a deep breath. This was the moment of real honesty, the kind that could make or break a career. The tinted windows, the nice neighborhood, the time of night. I made assumptions based on things I've seen in training videos, things I've heard other officers talk about. He paused, gathering courage. But if I'm being completely honest, sir, I think I saw what I expected to see because of biases I didn't even know I had. Thompson leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Do you know what makes a good officer great, Peterson? It's not their arrest record or their ability to write tickets. It's their capacity to learn from their mistakes and their willingness to confront their own prejudices. The captain opened his phone and pulled up a series of training materials. These are statistics from our department's traffic stops over the past year. Look at the patterns. He handed the phone to Peterson, who studied the numbers with growing understanding. The disparities. Peterson whispered, seeing the data in a new light. Yes, Thompson confirmed. But here's what's important. You're not alone in this. Every officer, myself included, has had to confront their biases. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge? A couple of teenagers walked past, their laughter carrying on the night air. Both officers noticed how the teens quieted and walked faster when they saw the uniforms, another small reminder of the work that needed to be done. I want you to do something, Thompson said, taking his phone back. For the next month, I want you to keep a detailed log of every traffic stop you make. Note your initial reason for the stop, your approach, your tone, and the outcome. Be honest about your thought process. Can you do that? Peterson nodded eagerly. Yes, sir, absolutely. And one more thing, Thompson added, his voice becoming more serious. Tomorrow morning, I want you to come to my office. We're going to review the body camera footage from tonight, not as punishment, but as a learning tool. Sometimes seeing ourselves through an objective lens is the best way to grow. The night had grown cooler, and more stars were visible in the sky above them. Peterson felt something shifting inside him, not just guilt or shame, but a genuine desire to change, to learn, to be better. Captain, Peterson said, standing up from the bench, I know saying sorry isn't enough, but I want you to know that tonight. Tonight changed everything for me. Thompson stood as well, placing a firm hand on Peterson's shoulder. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. Because tomorrow, we start the real work. 1 month after the fateful traffic stop, the 15th Precinct's main conference room was packed with officers for their morning briefing. Captain Thompson stood at the podium, but today was different. Next to him stood Officer Peterson, looking nervous but determined in his freshly pressed uniform. Before we begin today's assignments, Thompson announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, Officer Peterson has something he'd like to share with all of you. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the young officer who had become known for his recent dedication to improving police-community relations. Peterson cleared his throat and stepped forward. A month ago, I made a mistake that could have had serious consequences. He glanced at Captain Thompson, who nodded encouragingly. I pulled over a black sedan without following proper protocol. That sedan belonged to our captain. A murmur went through the room. Some officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward, interested in where this story was going. But what happened next changed my entire approach to policing. Peterson continued, pulling out his notebook. Instead of filing a complaint, Captain Thompson took the time to teach me. For the past month, I've been keeping detailed records of every traffic stop I've made. The patterns I found in my own behavior were eye-opening. He turned to the PowerPoint presentation behind him, showing graphs and statistics from his personal data collection. In my first week of conscious documentation, I realized I was 3 times more likely to conduct searches on vehicles driven by minorities. My approach was more aggressive, my tone less professional. The room remained silent, but the attention was intense. Every officer present knew they could have been in Peterson's shoes that night. That's why I volunteered to help Captain Thompson develop our new training program, Peterson announced. We're calling it Mirror Moments, because sometimes we need to see our own reflection clearly before we can change. Captain Thompson stepped forward, clicking to the next slide. Starting next week, every officer will participate in this program. It's not about shame or blame. It's about awareness and improvement. He gestured to several community leaders sitting in the back of the room. We've invited members of our community to share their experiences and perspectives. Among the community representatives was Michael, Captain Thompson's 16-year-old son, sitting tall and proud. His presence was a powerful reminder of why this work mattered. The program has 3 components, Peterson explained, gaining confidence as he spoke. First, mandatory body camera review sessions where we analyze our interactions. Second, community dialogue sessions where we listen to the people we serve. Third, data tracking and analysis of our stops and interactions. He pulled up his own traffic stop logs from the past month. Since implementing these self-awareness techniques, my stop outcomes have changed dramatically. more warnings issued when appropriate, better communication, and most importantly, positive feedback from community members. A veteran officer raised his hand. But what about officer safety? We can't second-guess ourselves in dangerous situations. Excellent question, Thompson responded. Officer safety remains our top priority, but here's what we've learned. Better community relations actually make our jobs safer. When people trust the police, they're more likely to cooperate and less likely to view us as threats. Peterson nodded, adding, "My traffic stops are actually smoother now. When I approach with respect and awareness, I get respect in return." The presentation continued with specific examples and techniques. Officers were given new logbooks, similar to the one Peterson had used, and scheduled for their first training sessions. As the briefing ended, officers filed out of the room, many stopping to talk with Peterson or examine the community feedback data more closely. The energy in the precinct was different, not tense or defensive, but open and ready for change. Captain Thompson watched as Peterson engaged with his fellow officers, explaining the program with passion and conviction. The young officer who had pulled him over a month ago was transformed, not just in his approach to policing, but in his understanding of his role in the community. "This is just the beginning," Thompson said quietly to himself, watching the positive interactions unfold. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah, showing Michael proudly speaking with a group of officers after the meeting. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like genuine change was possible. Not just policy changes on paper, but real, lasting transformation in the hearts and minds of the officers who served their community. 6 months after that fateful traffic stop, the 15th Precinct's community room was filled to capacity. Local news cameras lined the back wall as Captain Thompson and Officer Peterson stood side by side, presenting the results of their Mirror Moments program to city officials, community leaders, and fellow officers from across the state. "The numbers speak for themselves," Thompson said, gesturing to the large screen behind him. "In just 6 months, we've seen a 40% reduction in complaint filings related to traffic stops. Our community satisfaction surveys show a 65% increase in trust between officers and citizens." Peterson stepped forward, looking much more confident than he had during his first presentation months ago. He was wearing a new pin on his uniform, the Mirror Moments program logo, which had become a symbol of positive change in the department. "But the real success isn't in the statistics," Peterson explained, clicking to the next slide. "It's in the stories." He played a short video clip showing officers and community members working together at neighborhood events, traffic stops ending with handshakes instead of handcuffs, and young people approaching officers to ask questions instead of avoiding them. In the front row, Michael Thompson sat next to his mother Sarah, beaming with pride. Just last week, he had helped lead a youth forum where teenagers could openly discuss their fears and experiences with law enforcement. The event had been Peterson's idea, inspired by his conversations with the captain about the talk that Black parents have to have with their children. "Our traffic stop logs now show no significant racial disparities in stop duration, search rates, or enforcement actions," Thompson continued. "But more importantly, our officers report feeling more confident and less stressed during their interactions with the public." An older officer stood up from the audience. "I've been on the force for 20 years, he said, his voice slightly shaky with emotion. "I thought I knew everything about policing. But this program, it made me see things I never noticed before. It made me a better officer." Peterson nodded in agreement. "That's exactly what happened to me that night 6 months ago. One traffic stop changed everything, not because of punishment, but because of understanding." The presentation continued with more data and testimonials. Other departments had begun implementing their own versions of the Mirror Moments program. The State Police Academy had incorporated elements of it into their basic training curriculum. After the formal presentation, people mingled in small groups, sharing experiences and ideas. Officer Peterson found himself speaking with a group of rookie officers from a neighboring precinct. "The key," he explained, "is to make it personal. Every traffic stop, every interaction, is a chance to either build trust or break it. We have to see people as people first." Across the room, Captain Thompson was showing the city mayor through their new training facility. The walls were lined with mirrors, literal representations of the program's name, each one bearing a different question. "Why did you make this stop? What assumptions are you bringing to this situation? How would you want to be treated? As the event wound down, Thompson and Peterson found themselves back on that same street where everything had started. They had just finished giving a television interview about the program's success. "You know what I realized, Captain?" Peterson said, looking at the park bench where they'd had their life-changing conversation. "That night, you could have ended my career. Instead, you chose to change it. And probably hundreds of others in the process." Thompson smiled, remembering that night. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments of honesty. He checked his watch. Almost time for dinner with his family. "My son told me something interesting yesterday. He said he's thinking about becoming a police officer." Peterson's eyes widened. "Really? After everything?" "No," Thompson corrected. "Because of everything. Because he's seen what real change looks like. He's seen that one person can make a difference." As they walked back to their cars, a young black teenager rode past on his bicycle. He waved at the officers, and they waved back. There was no fear in the interaction, no tension, just a simple moment of community connection. "That," Thompson said quietly, "is what success looks like." The sun was setting over the precinct, casting long shadows across the street. But unlike 6 months ago, these shadows no longer held the same weight of assumptions and bias. They were just shadows now, and the light of understanding was growing stronger every day.